I'm very happy and satisfied that you have decided to listen and look at this series of DVDs and CDs that I have put together for you. This is important to me that you have decided to do this. This is actually my first opportunity outside of working with people individually and talking to groups to have an opportunity to put together what I have culled from 25 years of experience with working like smokers just like you. And what I've tried to do is put into this program things that have worked for many people, different programs, because there are many, many programs, some of which are very good, I might add, but programs to try to help people to stop smoking. I will be giving this particular talk on this DVD to you about reasons to stop smoking, just some general information that I can give you that I think can be helpful. Additionally, I will be having a CD for you that is on trance hypnosis. It is a trance hypnosis tape. And this in itself has often been enough to have people stop smoking that have the commitment, the desire, and can have the subconscious really take control in a positive way in terms of not having it be negative messages, but positive messages. Additionally, I have a CD that you can use in your car, in your home, or anywhere. Just a constant reinforcement for you to use. I also have a DVD that actually is a talk that I gave in East Lansing, Michigan for Healthwise University, or Ingham Regional Medical Center. And it's actually a talk that's entitled The Influence of Weight Gain on Anxiety and Depression. And I debated exactly what to do with that, because I have many DVDs or many tapes, different things that I've done over many years. But I have found so many people, when they quit smoking or when they're even desiring to quit smoking, one of the things that keeps them continuing smoking is anxiety, is depression, and just factors that kind of overwhelm them. So I've decided to have that tape put together because, again, overeating is also another type of a compulsion, another type of an addiction, different than smoking, but certainly relates. So I've included that, and plus I'll have an introduction talking specifically about smoking as it relates to weight gain in particular, but also in terms of anxiety and depression. I also have I call it a classic, a 1987, which I've taken from tape to CD, a California tape I did many years ago, and it's in a beautiful setting. If anyone's familiar with Southern California, right in the South Bay area, where Redondo Beach, where Torrance Beach, where Palos Verdes all come together. And it's just a basic relaxation, because I feel, in addition to the trance hypnosis tape, which is also a relaxation tape on smoking, this is something additional for you in terms of being able to help for just relaxing. And then I have a DVD where I'm wanting to do something different. I'm going to be right with you. I'm going to be with you right from when you determine on what the quit date is. And you're going to come and be with me on different days. The first day we're going to be meeting is when you've decided you're going to quit. And on that day, you're going to turn on the DVD and you're going to come to me and I'm going to talk to you. Talk to you about what to look forward to. What are the situations? What are some of the concerns? Additionally, I'm going to talk to you on the next day, the day after quit day, the first day. And talk to you at that time in terms of reinforcement, in terms of what might be happening to you and some ideas. I'm also going to talk to you on the second day, and again on the third day, and again at the end of the first week, and then at the end of 30 days, and then another time, if ever to that point you decide that you might want to listen to that for whatever the reason might be. But I'll be talking more about that when we get into that particular DVD. So let me just tell you a little bit about me. My professional career begins in 1966 when I was teaching school. In addition to teaching school, I've worked as a school psychologist. I taught a number of years, graduate and undergraduate classes at Michigan State University. I also was administrator in public schools. Also worked a number of years as a consultant and manager with the state of Michigan. And for the past 25 years, I have been a full-time private practice psychologist in Michigan. And I've also done a number of informational and educational teaching sessions and seminars. And what I'm doing here, my goal is certainly not to be impacting negatively on any necessary medical or psychological treatment. This is educational. I'm trying to help you do something that I think is very important. One of the reasons I'm very committed to trying to help you stop smoking is I was a smoker myself for over 25 years. I know all the hooks. I know all the things that can happen to you. How we start off with the best of intentions that we're going to stop, but we don't. Those days when we're having terrible cough or we don't feel good, we can't run, and we're going to quit, but we don't. It's kind of like Mark Twain said, it's so easy to quit smoking that he did it 1,000 times. So I certainly understand the hooks, and I really understand that. And I think everybody has a different reason for wanting to stop smoking. It's very individual as fingerprints, and that's an important thing to know. So there's no one way. That's another reason why this particular program that I put together, I try to include different ideas, different things that you can do. Not just, if you do this, it's going to save you immediately, or if you do this, because that really doesn't work. I think that we really need to be pretty realistic, look at things from a comprehensive point of view, try to do the best we can, and realize, of course, ultimately, that we have the control over whether we smoke or we do not smoke, this being a very key factor. But let me go all the way back here. I was working with people in smoking, say 25 years ago, right from that up to the present. And I began noticing that people were coming in here, beginnings of emphysema, people that were really in terrible health, some people dying, and it really bothered me. It began to bother me. And it brought back another time. I was riding in my neighborhood one day, and I ran into an old fellow, somebody I had known years before, and I was doing work with the state. And he was out there. This was one of these vibrant World War II vet, just a tremendous character, personality. And I recognized him, and he did too. He was just kind of sitting out there with this oxygen into his mouth or into his nose. And I went up and I said, we'll call him Bill. I said, Bill, nice to see you. And he said, John. I said, yes. He said, John, promise me you're going to quit smoking. Because he knew I smoked, of course. And I said, well, I'm certainly going to look into it. I didn't want to be lying. And he said, I'm like this because I smoked. I am slowly dying. And he wasn't really saying it in a way of pity. He just made the statement to me, and I never forgot that, but I still was smoking at that time. And as I began to work with people, it began to really impact on me. And then, some years after that, a friend of mine, somebody I knew well, and he first had lung cancer, thought he beat it, and then one day was driving his car and had double vision, brain cancer. And I remember meeting with him towards the end, and he said, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I have so many things I want to do with family, with grandchildren, crying and very upset. And what do? You can hug someone, you can hold them, you can console them, but there's really not much you can do. But that certainly has an impact on you. You know, the fact that my grandfather had died of cancer related to chewing tobacco, a great aunt had died from lung cancer due to smoking. They were far removed. Just the impact, I didn't really know these people, didn't have the impact. But when you see things like this, it starts to impact really on you. And then even recently, long after I quit smoking, I had a dear friend die recently, just terrible emphysema, and a young man, really, in his 50s actually, and didn't want to die. Well, of course, we may want to go to heaven, as my mother said, but we don't want to rush to get there necessarily. And sad. And it kind of convinced me there's really a need to put something together where I potentially can reach more people in a reasonable way, inexpensive way, and just try to be helpful. So this is some of just a little information. I could share hundreds of stories with you about smokers and things that I have seen, but that'll give you a little taste for commitment and why I really want to help you to the point that you're just going to stop this, okay? Not from a guilt, from a horrible story point of view, but from the point of view of trying to be helpful to you. Now let's just a little bit of information here. You know, it's wonderful that millions of people have quit smoking. But it's also amazing how many people continue to smoke. It's also amazing when you hear that anywhere from 80 to 90% of people that do smoke would like to stop to smoke if they could find a way they could do it or do it relatively easily. I certainly fit in that category for a number of years. And when you have dear friends and clients and people you know dying difficult, non-dignified deaths, you really think about these things. In fact, I recently wrote an article on smoking and its problems for the Lansing Journal. In fact, I've written a few of them here in the recent past. And you begin thinking when you hear about people dying and you see this, and it gives you more and more of a desire to be helpful. But again, when you realize what's even in smoking, when you even realize what's in smoke, when you realize that you're talking about not only the nicotine, which the Surgeon General has called as addictive as heroin or cocaine, but you're talking about arsenic, things that we kill animals with, ammonia, lead, carbon monoxide. It's really kind of amazing when you think about what actually is in cigarettes. 4,000 types of chemicals, or call them what you will, and the fact that they have been out there, the tobacco, who knows what's been dropped on it, what chemicals are being used, and we're smoking this stuff. It just is hard to believe logically, because smoking is one of the few things that many people do that absolutely has no good purpose whatsoever. Because people's one example that think it reduces anxiety doesn't do that at all. People get anxious because they need their nicotine. After a few seconds, it goes right into the body. So it's just one of those really very, very difficult types of things in terms of trying to get over. Now, people find many different ways to quit smoking. There's no question about that. And of course, one of the ways is simply just to quit. That's maybe the best way to do it. But there are other things that people do. And I'll talk maybe a little bit about this a little later in this talk. But again, let's talk about some of the most obvious dangers in terms of smoking. The American Lung Association says there are approximately 430,700 deaths per year in the United States resulting from smoking-related illness. Think about that. 430,700. That's just amazing. Yearly costs in the United States due to smoking, we're talking about $97.2 billion in lost productivity and healthcare costs. And of course, that productivity relates to money that could be coming into people's homes in the form of wages and income. And smoking is directly responsible for 87% of lung cancer and most cases of emphysema and chronic bronchitis. And secondhand smoke is also dangerous. In the case of children, there's a far greater tendency for them to have colds, bronchitis, asthma, inflammatory bowel disease. So if you really look at this, the toll for smoking is really deadly and horrific for the smoker and those around them. So this is just something to really just kind of put in your mind. I mean, those are numbers that are so mind-boggling that it's really kind of scary, actually. And if you look at this in terms of the immediate effects of stopping smoking, I mean, if you really look at it in that sense, the minute you stop smoking, good things start happening. Good things start happening to you. And it's just actually hard to believe, because most times when people stop doing something, it takes a while. Well, that's really not the case here. In the case of the smoker, we're talking about 20 minutes after you quit. Blood pressure drops to a level close to that before the last cigarette. Now think about that. The temperature of your hands and feet increases to normal. That's just 20 minutes after smoking. 8 hours after quitting, the carbon monoxide level in your blood drops to normal. This, of course, is what comes out of the exhaust in cars. 24 hours after quitting, your chance of a heart attack decreases. 2 weeks to 3 months after quitting, your circulation improves and your lung function increases up to 30%. If you're like me, you remember those days. It's hard to go up the stairs. It's hard to carry, hard to do things. And then 1 to 9 months after quitting, coughing, sinus congestion, fatigue, and shortness of breath decrease. Cilia, this is the tiny hair structures that move mucus out of the lungs, they regain their normal function, increasing the ability to handle the mucus, clean the lungs, and reduce infection. And I might add, when people quit smoking, just one example, often the person goes from the smoker's cough to initial cough, which they can't figure out. And that's because the cilia are really getting healthy again. They're coming back, and they're trying to cleanse the lungs of the tar, the nicotine, the gook, whatever, call it what you will. So, but be aware, all of this starts working in a good way for you. Then 1 year after quitting, the excess risk of coronary heart disease is half that of a smoker's. 5 years after quitting, the stroke risk is reduced to that of a non-smoker. Okay, 15 years after quitting. Okay, 10 years after quitting, the lung cancer death rate is about half that of a continuing smoker's. The risk of cancer of the mouth, throat, esophagus, bladder, kidney, and pancreas decrease also. So if you just look at those, that information, if you can, when you hit your quit date, when you determine that you're going to stop, think about that. And always keep those types of things, 20 minutes, the 8 hours, the 24 hours, 2 weeks to 3 months, 1 to 9 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, call it what you will. That's just amazing what can really happen for you just by stopping smoking. I just recently read something on the internet indicating that data is showing that when people have quit smoking after many years, and this is basically what I was just saying here, this coming from Lung Association, that people's lungs can actually get right back to very healthy condition with almost as good a prognosis if they did not smoke. And that's really an important thing, to remember, that your chances of having a normal life, not dying horribly, become very, very, become much better. Okay. Now, I'm going to be talking about some different things here. And I think, as I said before, it's important for you to pick and choose things that actually work for you. As I mentioned, for some people, hypnosis is enough. For others, they can use some of the medical type of the nicotine patches, called with in this area. They can also be, using the Wellbutrin, okay, which it's a medication which of course has to be coming through through your medical doctor, also called Zyban, I might add. But each of these is really different. I also recommend, if you do decide to use nicotine replacement products, okay, I do suggest that you do talk to a medical doctor about any time you're dealing with any type of a medicine. That's at least my feeling. A lot of people don't do that, but certain ones you have to, because they require the doctor, but others really do not. But I just think it just makes sense. Also, I think you'll find if you can really get into relaxing, relaxation is another very important thing to really help you when you feel the need to be smoking, to really start breathing in and breathing out and just mimicking the smoking in a positive way, where what you're doing, you're just breathing in deeply, breathing in cleanliness, and just breathing out, and doing that as a replacement. And try to get in the image every time that you're breathing, that you're actually cleansing your lungs. Okay. And you can use the deep relaxation tape that is part of this series here that can help you. Also, the trance hypnosis CD that is here for you on stopping smoking also can do the same thing. So they both kind of can relate to the same type of a positive programming for you to be doing. The breathing in, the breathing out. This is important. A lot of people find when they can really relax, it cuts out one of the hooks, if you will. Because one of the reasons people smoke is they claim that they're anxious, they're worried, and if you can beat that at the bud by doing just basic relaxation, which is for thousands of years has often been one of the top ways for people to relax anyway, it can be very helpful for you. Okay. And then I think after you do quit smoking, after you've hit the quit date, okay, then you want to drink a lot of water. You really want to flush the nicotine out of your body, as well as satisfying oral cravings you may have. And you also want to be changing what you're eating, of course, in terms of things that can take the place. You can have carrots, you can have celery, you can have cucumbers. You also can have things like cinnamon sticks. You can have gum. You can have anything, because with many people, it's part of this is habit. Okay, it's almost a psychological as well as the general nicotine addiction. Keeping your hands busy, knitting, holding things, squeeze balls, pencil in hand, call it whatever you will. But for sure, the water is critical. Certainly fruit juices are good too, but you really definitely want to do that. Okay, and I think another thing, you really have to be taking a look at the hooks, at the reasons that you smoke. As part of this program, I will be having some things for you to have that will be in written form. But you really have to decide what are the times that you specifically smoke? When are they? Most people have a habit time. I know in my case, it was in the morning, reading the paper, smoking, and drinking coffee. That just seemed like a natural time. Another time was in a meeting. If we were meeting, discussing things at the table, it just seemed like a natural thing to be smoking. At dinner, after dinner, it just made sense to have a cigarette, that type thing. And you have to stop that. You have to cut those hooks out. Get something to replace that activity. Putting it in psychological terms, or behavioral terms, call it what you will, it's like the ABCs. You have an antecedent, you have a behavior, and if you have a consequence. Example, if the time that you're the most prone to smoke is with coffee in the morning with the newspaper, that is the antecedent. The behavior is the smoking. The consequence is you continue smoking and you don't stop. A thing to do is, if you're downstairs, you look at the paper, quickly have a little coffee, but you go walk. Okay, you take a walk, or you drink a lot of water, or you do something to take the place. Another one, if it's right after dinner, let's say after dinner, the time for you is just to kind of sit back and have that cigarette, you just don't do that. Again, you may have some dessert, hopefully low cal, because you don't want to be gaining a lot of weight. Or you just, again, do some exercising. You go for a walk. You do something else. Very important that you determine the times that you smoke, okay, and that you come up with consequences, or different consequences, by changing the behavior itself, by controlling where you are when you would normally do that, or what you are doing. For a lot of people, drinking alcohol is a horrible thing because people often associate the smoking with alcohol, and additionally, it can kind of cut down their resistance. Many people that lose weight find the same thing, that if you cut down on your drinking, you're going to cut down on your grazing in the kitchen late at night. I think you'll find that from a lot of people. Also, social gatherings are certain places where people tend to smoke. Being with certain people, you may even find that, at least temporarily, you're going to have to change some of the people that you are with, because you may find when you get with old Uncle Harry, you just get together and smoke a cigarette, okay? These are the things that have to happen. And additionally, be aware, as horrible as it sounds, there are some people that aren't going to want you to quit. And hopefully it's not for what I call horrible reasons. They may just don't want to lose their smoking buddy. But there are people that were going to want you to keep smoking. I was working with a woman here a while ago, and her mother did not want her to quit smoking. So she'd always have a cigarette in her mouth. Well, you can have one, that type thing. So, and I always remember, one puff will land you on your rump, is kind of the way I look at it. Puts you really down. So you just have to get to the point that you're going to reduce all possibilities for you to be smoking when you do decide that you're really going to stop smoking. And be aware, the first days after you do decide to stop are going to be very, very difficult. Very, very difficult for you. And be prepared for the internal statements as the addictive, Mr. or Mrs. Nicotine, says, go ahead, have just one. And remember, relapse can never occur without taking just one. Kind of like the AA, one is too many and 1,000 isn't enough. I think in the case of smoking, you can say one isn't enough and limitless tens of thousands, okay? Or one is too many, and limitless tens of thousands are not enough. And that's really a key thing. And I always say, remember, if you don't have the first cigarette after you stop, you're never going to have the second, the third, or the 10,000th. So that's really a very critical thing And also, remember, be aware that the withdrawal symptoms can be very harsh, can be difficult for you. Everyone's totally different, but they can be different. People can be anxious, they can be depressed, they can be irritable, they can have troubles with insomnia, they can have an irritable bowel, they can feel a little wheezy. Remember, the body is totally changing, and the body, by defending itself against the nicotine, against all this poison putting in the body, has actually been adapting to the smoke. You remember the first time you smoked? It was a horrible experience, okay? It was just amazing, like going right over into the back of the car, the carbon monoxide, just sitting there and kind of smoking it in. So when you quit, you've got to remember there's going to be different oxygen flow, the veins are going to be bigger, the heart's going to be different, everything's going to be different. And ironically, that has been the case sometimes with people going back to smoking. Well, just be aware, those are things that can happen. And be aware, after a few days, things really do get better, certainly from the physical point of view. The psychological hooks can certainly continue. But just be aware that these things can occur, because a lot of times people are really not expecting to be restless or anxious. I've had people come and see me, well, Dr. Braccio, I was told that if I did this, I was going to be relaxed and I wouldn't feel a certain way. Well, I did. Well, my view is this. If you really try to do the suggestions I have here, and the things that I'm talking to you about, will continue talking to you about, you have a really exceptionally high probability of succeeding, of really doing well. Ultimately, you are the person who will decide exactly what happens. I can be your guide. I can be your teacher. I can do that. But I can't control restlessness, insomnia, anxiety, maybe even being confrontational, a little frustrated. You just have to be aware of those things beforehand. You have to say what you're not going to do or what you will do. And be aware the symptoms are definitely going to go away. And I think it's important when you decide that you're going to stop smoking that you let people know. And even try to get some support. You know, not people that you're going to fight over, give me a cigarette right now. No, not that type thing at all. But let people know if you need someone to be supportive to you, if you have a spouse, if you have a friend, if you have work colleagues, if you have people that have quit smoking, let them know what you're doing. Have a buddy, have someone you can talk to. I think you will find people will be helpful to you. And I don't mean the people that are demanding that you stop because they're incensed you do. That isn't really going to help you. Find people that have really, done the talk, done the walk. They have done it, and they have succeeded, and they can be helpful to you. And with yourself, one of the things you have to recognize is that when you decide to hit your quit date, stop smoking, it has to be an irreversible decision. Really, such as when you choose to marry, you choose to have children. You can't really back out. I mean, you definitely, when you're married, you're married. When you have children, you have children. I'm very happily married, so it's not a complaint about marriage. Just making an observation about what a major decision this is. Because if you approach it, well, I think I'll just try. I think I'll just try to quit. If I don't do it, well, with that attitude, you really won't. I know when I've worked with people over many years, many persons I've suggested they really not meet with me, because there's not a commitment. I've said, if you want to have a chance for success, and I want to have a follow-through in terms of people wanting to work with me because of my being successful, it's important that we be meeting with you being fully committed to what you're doing, because I can be your guide and I can help you, but ultimately, you're the one who has to walk the walk, so to speak. Do what you're going to do. But I have tremendous confidence you can do it. And of course, I want to be helpful. I really hope that I can just help you do this, because if I can even add a day to a certain number of people to their lives, and I'd like to add a lot more than that, then I'm going to feel that I have been successful and helpful. Now, I think another thing you've got to do, when you decide to hit quit date, you have to change your house. You have to get rid of everything. You have to have cigarettes, you have to ashtrays, you really have to de-smoke in a way. All the paraphernalia, everything that relates to smoking. You really have to. You can't, an alcoholic doesn't go sit in a bar to show that he or she can control drinking. You don't do those things. The obese person does not sit in Baskin-Robbins ice cream to show they're tough, okay? No. And you're the same way. If you're going to be quitting smoking completely. You want to be in an environment where you're not going to be tested. I'd like you to take at least 5 reasons, but the main reasons that you have decided to stop smoking. Okay, I think that's critical. Certainly it could be cost. It certainly could be how expensive. Like I was just figuring, this was actually in an article that I had written in terms of the cost, that if you're to smoke 1 pack a day, okay, and cigarettes is $4.50 a pack as an example, you're looking at $3,285. Isn't that amazing? Just from having 1 pack of cigarettes a day. I mean, that sounds like a long, a joyous family trip to Florida or California. Certainly what it sounds like to me. It sounds like an amazing television set you might find for your house. Sounds like a lot of good things. Educational material, training, call it what you will. And over 10 years, that's $32,850. I mean, my goodness, that just in itself certainly sounds like a good incentive. So, and another thing I would do, I would keep track of that money every day. I would either put it in a bowl or just write down what it is, maybe because someone might want to come over and take your bowl, and just keep track of it. And maybe have some short-term goals in terms of what you're going to do with that money. But again, money is one of the ones, saving money. Another one, a very natural one, is health. Wanting to live as long as you can. Because even one and related to that is being able to spend time with your grandchildren, even great-grandchildren. Certain goals that you can have, that you want to have. Another would be just as ooky, it's smelly, okay, that type of a thing. Another is you're fearful with the secondhand smoke, that you're aware of the dangers that this could have. Another could be modeling. You want to model for your children, grandchildren, workers, co-workers, call it whatever you will. There are many reasons. I mean, I don't know what all the reasons are for you, but I'm just giving you some of the more common ones that you certainly have. Another one, this is going to sound like kind of a macabre thing, but I think it's a good thing to do. Sometime go to a cemetery. Just go in there, sit down. You could also drive by if you weren't comfortable doing that, and turn off your car and just look around. And you can be sure there's some people there, deep down, people that are dead, that ought not to be dead. They ought to be out with family, they ought to be out with friends, they ought to be out with their spouse, but they're not. They died early, very early, 40s, 50s, 60s, in a time and place when people are living often into their 80s. And estimates are that a man and a woman loses over 10 years. Isn't that hard if you're really a heavy smoker all the time? So that's kind of a macabre thought, but I think it's a good thought, something you might think about. Another one is, as you walk the road of life, you're going to see a key person you respect, person you care for, that dies before his or her time due to smoking. And I would keep that in your mind. That's a good image and a good memory, hopefully, for that person, because you can use that type of a memory as a way to really help you as an incentive not to smoke. This, I think, is really, very key. And I think another thing, if you have any type of a relapse, or meaning after you quit smoking, if you have a smoke, if you have a cigarette, don't let that ruin the world for you. Just continue as if it didn't happen, or just move on. Meaning, you had a cigarette, don't use that, like so many people do, as the invitation to do 100 more. Use that as an awareness of how powerful a hook the smoking is. And be aware of how it happened, okay? Always all the W's, where it happened, when it happened, why it happened, this type of thing, and eliminate that. And just make sure that's really what you're doing. And also, it's important to really be aware of how powerful nicotine addiction is. I've known so many people over the years that somehow do not think what they have is an addiction. They think it's a choice. And people even use kind of self-defeating statements like, well, everybody's going to die sometime anyway. But who wants to die young, barely being able to breathe with emphysema, taking in oxygen? That's just not a reasonable thing, to me. Another one that you hear is, well, it really reduces anxiety. I need it for that. And it just doesn't reduce anxiety. I mean, if it's that type of a psychological crutch, then you obviously need something in place of that. But again, as I mentioned before, the nicotine hit is actually what seems to reduce the anxiety, because it's actually getting the hit that really keeps the person going. And there are also many people that will come up with any reason. Anyway, they're afraid they're going to be gaining a lot of weight. Well, it is true to some degree, we cannot tell a lie, that there is a certain percent of people, maybe 25%, whatever it might be, that do gain some weight. The main thing to do is prepare yourself. That's another one of the important things about preparation. Because before you decide to quit, you have to be prepared. You have to be aware of what you're going to do. Because people will say, well, I'm not going to quit smoking because I'll gain weight. Or, when I smoked before, I gained 10 pounds. I'm not going to do that. Well, again, I guess I would even argue the point, you're better to weigh a little more than really suffer the consequences of the terrible death that certainly comes from too often, from smoking. So just try to kick out those types of statements. But again, I want to talk a little, in fact, I'll be talking more on the other DVD in this set about the weight in terms of the smoking. But be aware that there are consequences from quitting smoking, that there definitely are side effects. I'd like you to see it as a challenge. I would like you not to see it as a reason not to try. To say they're not there just isn't realistic. There may be a few people that just stop and it never bothers them again. I even mention now, every now and then, I even think of smoking a cigarette. Isn't that something? Even after all these years and everything I've seen, I don't. I really don't. There's certain things in life that you have to make a decision. This is one of those, a positive, life-altering change. And even though things are different, like when I was a relatively, no one likes to admit they're getting older, but when I was really a young person, smoking was really a far more socially acceptable thing. Any movie with Frank Sinatra, the Dean Martins, the Humphrey Bogarts, whoever it might be, everybody was smoking. Everybody smoked. My dad even smoked cigars until he finally stopped. Now, it's really not socially acceptable in many, many quarters, but still, there are countless millions of people that are smoking. And it's really amazing. To me, it continues to amaze me. Okay, and that amazes me at the level when you look at the consequences. So my hope is through a series that I put together, I think, in really quite an inexpensive fashion for the extensiveness of the program, with the goal of getting it to as many people as possible, that you can beat the addiction. You can win. You can do it. It's up to you. But again, I want you to be able to say, I'm free from smoking. It even sounds good. I'm free from smoking. I'm a non-smoker. I do not smoke. That is a key thing. And any time I hear someone say that and I feel I was involved due to this information I'm giving you, I am going to feel terrific. I am going to feel really, really good. So I hope this has been useful to you. And what I want you to do now is really begin looking into the quit date, when you're going to stop, exactly what you're going to do, being aware of the hooks. At this point, I would start keeping track of why you smoke, okay? The reasons you don't want to smoke. Find out exactly when you do smoke, and keep track of those on sheets of paper. And again, you'll have some of this from me with the rest of the materials you have from me. And start identifying when you do smoke, and then start setting up your quit date in a way that you have substitutes for smoking at that time, or you are absolutely committed, you're not going to do that, and then you have other things. You can exercise, you can do whatever you want to do. I would also suggest that you be listening to at least the California relaxation tape to be getting into deep breathing, getting into the relaxation. And then when you're really just about ready to go, then at that point, I would suggest you use the trance hypnosis smoking tape. And you can even use that now if you feel you're ready to do that. And then in addition to that, there's also the reinforcement tape that you can actually use anytime, I might add, but in your house, in your car, wherever you might want to do that. And then when all of this is going and you're really ready, absolutely, then go to the DVD that directly relates to my being with you on the different days from quit date, 30 days into the future. As I said, we'll meet in a day, 2 days, 3 days, 7 days, 30 days, and then there'll also be one other meeting in the future as you desire. So that's where we are. I have confidence in you. I believe if you try what I have put together for you in terms of working with these materials, some or all, because not everyone needs everything, and you really try your best, I think you can really succeed. And be aware there's not just one way, because you may find, in addition to what we're doing here, that something like Zyban, in terms of nicotine patches, in terms of whatever it might be, other things can help you too. Okay, what I mean, there's not just one thing. Sometimes having many things can be helpful. I tend to believe, as I said earlier, that just stopping, being ready, having the weapons, the tools, such as controlling, making sure you're in an environment where you're not going to be smoking, making sure if there are times you have smoked, that you will have a substitute, you'll do something different at that time. That is really the best way to go. So, and again, the tape that I also have, I'll mention again, the one on the weight, the DVD. That's something that will not necessarily be for everyone. But for those of you that really have a fear about weight, I think that could be useful. Even though I'm talking about anxiety and depression as it relates to weight on the main part of that DVD, I think you will find that that will directly relate to you as it relates to smoking. And I'll also be having a segment that I'll be talking about first, specifically talking about the weight and the smoking. So let's go, let's do it. I'm just glad we're together on this, and I just want you to succeed. It'll make me feel terrific. So let's go and move from here.